This is the story of two Agile teams. More correctly, it's the tale of one Agile team that split into two Agile teams. What makes the story interesting is that it was more than just an organisational separation. It was an Agile separation. Hi, this is Gary. Welcome to Development That Pays. I joined a team in 2012. It was, I was told, a team that did Agile. At the time, I knew very little about Agile, but I could see from the get-go that they weren't doing it by halves. There's clearly been lots of training. They had all kinds of tools. They were doing all kinds of rituals. We'll get into the specifics of how the team worked in a minute. Fast forward a year and the company went through a fairly major reorganisation. My team was split in two. Although reporting lines changed, the seating plan didn't. There was one outward indication of change. Where there had been one Agile board, there was now two. Oh, and we did two stand-ups every day. Ours at 10 a.m, theirs at 1:15. Ever observant, it took me a couple of weeks to notice that the other team was doing a different flavour of Agile. I hadn't realised that there was more than one flavour of Agile. What my team was doing was called Scrum. The other team were doing something called Kanban. Now, Kanban, that word was one that I knew from way back, but I knew it in the context of manufacturing. I couldn't immediately see how it applied to the process used by my former teammates. So I asked the lead developer of Team Kanban, what's the difference between Scrum and Kanban? He was ready with an immediate answer. You guys talk about work, we do work. Ouch. In that moment, I learned an important lesson about Agile. It can be a very emotive issue. Beliefs can be deep-seated. The Team Kanban lead dev clearly thought that Kanban was better than Scrum. I held the opposite view. My view was both strongly held and completely without evidential foundation. I'm a little older now, and I hope a little wiser. I can now see that the team separation was a perfect natural experiment, along the lines of take two identical twins, separate them at birth, feed one Scrum, feed the other Kanban, observe the result. So I hope you'll join me in a little forensic investigation. It's going to take more than one episode to do it, but in this episode we have just enough time to take a 2,000-foot view of the two teams and their processes. Team Scrum worked in 2-week sprints. On the Monday, we take ourselves off to a quiet part of the building for a sprint planning session. The product owner would select items from the backlog, we'd play planning poker to estimate the size of each item, and we'd carry on like that until we had roughly one sprint's worth of cards. Sprint planning over, each developer would pick up a card and set to work. Every morning there'd be a stand-up, 10 a.m. at the dot, and so it would go on day after day with the cards gradually making their way across the board. By about the Tuesday of the second week, we'd expect all of the cards to have moved at least one step. It's then a race, a sprint, to get everything tested and ready by Friday. We didn't always succeed in getting everything across the board. Any item that failed to make it would be recycled into the next sprint. On the Friday morning, everything in the final column, the release column, would be packaged and made ready for release. One last thing to round out the sprint, a retrospective, a chance for the team to get together, to reflect on what went well, to discuss what could be improved, and to commit to one or two action items for the following sprint. Let's take stock of the evidence we've gathered so far. There's a product backlog, the Agile board, and a done pile. There's a 2-week sprint with a sprint planning session at the beginning. Each day after that, a daily Scrum meeting, aka a stand-up. And at the end of the process, all of the cards that made it to the final column are packaged, ready for release. Finally, on the afternoon of the last day of the sprint, a retrospective. Moving on to Team Kanban. As with Team Scrum, there's a backlog, there's an Agile board, of course they called it a Kanban board, and a done pile. There's no sprint. Instead of a group of cards making their way across a board in a specific time period, cards flow across the board continuously. And there's no specific release day. It's up to the team to decide when to package for release. They typically wait for a fairly significant feature to be finished and tested before packaging. In practice, that meant they were releasing maybe once or twice a week. That's 2 to 3 times more frequently than Team Agile. Taking stock of the evidence, there's a product backlog, Kanban board, and a done pile. No sprint, no sprint planning, no 2-week period, and no retrospective. There is a daily stand-up, and of course they're packaging and releasing, and doing so 2 to 3 times more frequently than Team Scrum. It's interesting data, but it's too soon to draw any firm conclusions. We'll collect more evidence next time. Talk to you then.